Hey everyone, welcome back to a Liftoff PM Product Management Career Talk. My name is Kevin Wei. I'm a Senior Product Manager at Amazon, and today we're going to be talking about the differences between working in big tech, like a FAANG company, Facebook, Google, Apple, versus startups, early stage startups, pre-seed, seed, maybe even Series A, Series B. So with us is Mark. Mark has startup experience, so he'll be sharing some of the insights from his perspective working at startups. I'll be sharing my insights working as a PM in big tech. Mark, do you want to give a quick intro before we jump right into the meat of the video?
Sure, you bet. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Mark Rose, and I've got a ton of experience both in small tech and big tech. I've worked in companies starting from one, or as myself, which we grew up and we eventually sold it to Visa, to a lot of companies that never sold to anyone at all, to big companies also like Google and Facebook. So I've worked at the broad spectrum, and so it's really exciting to talk about all the differences in all these different stages of companies and which ones are going to be right for you. All right, Kevin.
Perfect. And before we jump right in, I want to say that Liftoff PM is going to be your go-to resource for any kind of product management interview prep. We have tons of videos coming out, very instructional videos on how to ace your PM interview and get that 10 out of 10 rating in your interview. So hit the like button, hit subscribe, leave a comment on what you want to see in the future, and also click the link in the description to join our community and get access to exclusive videos. So jumping right into our 10 key areas, differences working as a PM in big tech versus startups is role, scope, and focus. So in big tech, again, these are like FAANG companies, right? Facebook, Apple, Google, Microsoft. Your role, scope, and focus is going to be more specialized than in the startup. And I'll be talking more about, again, in the big tech space, and I'll have Mark discuss his perspective from startups. But in big tech, your role, scope, and focus is pretty well defined. Even if you're working on a very greenfield project, it's going to be much more well defined because you're going to have gotten leadership approval. There's going to have been headcount and budget scoped out for you. Typically, you're going to have a manager who more or less will give you some kind of direction, even if it's a little ambiguous, you're still going to get a little bit of direction there. And as a PM, you'll probably have some kind of cross-functional partners that you'll be able to work with. Now, every team is under-resourced, but you'll probably have some engineers, maybe a designer or data scientist, and you'll probably be focused on scaling and improving the product if it's an established product. So that's the perspective from big tech. Now, Mark, from a startup perspective, how does the role, scope, and focus of the PM role change, or is it pretty similar?
Actually, it's very different at a startup. At a startup, let's start with, usually startups haven't even achieved product market fit yet. That is, they don't even know what product they want to build. That means that the entire company is looking to product to figure out this core question. So there's a lot of greenfield. There's also a lot of risk. There's also a lot of burden because the company is looking to you to figure out what it is that the company should build, who the company should target, what customers are going to be profitable, and why you should do it. So it's much more greenfield. You're going to have to invent a lot. You're going to have to be very creative. You're going to have to borrow from other industries. And there's going to be no one there to give you a roadmap. You kind of have to figure it out yourself. And it can be quite empowering, and it's quite challenging. And it's a great way to go if you want to have lots and lots of scope, and also lots of ambiguity because you're not sure what you're going to do and what's the right path.
Awesome. So we're moving on now to theme number 2, which is job stability. So let's talk a little bit about job stability, big tech versus startups. So in big tech, I'd say that typically the job stability is more stable than working at a startup. Typically, if you're working on a more established product, you'll have already established market presence. There's going to be financial resources that are helping you out. There's going to be revenue being generated, and this revenue is going to feed into the headcounts. And if the product does well, like for example, if you join Instagram in the early days right after it got acquired, and as Instagram grew and became really popular, it's very likely that everyone on the team got promotions. So I think this is definitely, big tech is definitely a place where you want to go if you want to have a little bit more job stability. Now in big tech, some companies are known for more rigorous performance reviews. So that is something to think about, right? But I think in terms of stability, like, is this company going to be around in 5 or 10 years? there's definitely going to be more stability here. Mark, how about job stability in startups?
So job stability in startups, always a fun question. I think of it as kind of a combination between Band of Brothers and Game of Thrones. And it's kind of like Band of Brothers in that you're in a small company with a small group of people. And if you're working hard, everyone bands together like a small team. And so from that perspective, you have tremendous job security because everybody wants everyone else to succeed and everyone's kind of in the same boat. That's a good thing. It's kind of like Game of Thrones in that you have a concept at start called runway. And runway means that the company usually only has so many financial resources, right? And from day one, when they get their funding, they're constantly eating those resources and they're constantly going down while you try and find your product market fit. And if you run out of runway before you discover product market fit, chances are you're going to find that your band of brothers are going to be a band of people all at the unemployment line. So stability tends to be a little bit less in some regards, and in some regards tends to be a little bit higher. And there's other ways that you can weigh off this financial risk that we'll talk about more.
All right, cool. So let's move on to key area number 3, career advancement and growth opportunities. As a PM in big tech, your career advancement and growth opportunities is definitely very structured. In big tech, you have levels. You can be joining as an L5, L6, L7 PM. There's a very well thought out career guideline for what a PM at a certain level should be doing, should be performing at. And there's performance processes, right? Like maybe once a year, twice a year, you as a PM, you'll have the opportunity to go through the process and try to get a promotion. That now, even though there is a process, it's probably going to be a little bit slower, especially in large organizations. There's only enough budget to give a certain number of people promotions. And also, at least what I've seen at Coinbase and at Amazon, you typically have to put together performance packets, meaning, packets showing all the docs you've written, all the things you've shipped, what the impact have been, also maybe even peer reviews, right? So your cross-functional partners, maybe your engineering partner or other PM partners, they can also write peer reviews and they'll help you in your performance packet. And I've also seen in some of these big tech companies, it's kind of a given that your first time going for a promotion, you're going to be rejected by the committee. So career advancement is definitely there. It's a very structured path to promotion, but definitely slower due to organizational size. Now, Mark, how about career advancement and growth opportunities in startups?
So startups are more like a race car. So your opportunities for advancement are pretty much defined by you. So if you can say like, look, I'm doing the role of a senior manager versus a manager, you can ask for that promotion and get it. If you can say, hey, I'm now managing 2 product managers, I should be a director, you can ask for that and get it. You can say, hey, now we've got a team of 5 product managers, but really I'm leading the whole thing and I should be a VP, and you can get it. The point is that at small companies, there's a lot of fluidity in titling, actually generosity in titling, I guess you could say too. So if you're after a lofty job title, you can definitely get it at a startup. If you're in for kind of what I call an all-you-can-eat career advancement path, you can definitely get it at a startup. And it goes all the way up to the CEO. CEOs are thirsty for people who just want to work and really crank it out and do the job that needs to be done. So if you can do that, your path, your ambitious path at a startup is much faster. But also it is limiting in a way because a startup is only as big as the fish tank that it's in, right? You can't be a VP of 200 product managers at a startup that has 50 people total, right? So you can only be as big as the fish tank that you're in a startup. And so in that way, you can grow as much as you want within the context of how much growth that you have at the startup itself.
All right, now let's move on to key area number 4, compensation and benefits. So in big tech, I'd say that compensation and benefits maybe they're higher than in startups. I'll let Mark share his thoughts, but typically if you're looking at, and this is maybe for FAANG companies, like this varies from company to company, but at least in FAANG companies, again, like this is Meta, Google, Apple, Microsoft, you'll typically start off your career with a higher salary, 150K, 200K, maybe 250, or even a little bit higher than that for someone who's a new grad, fresh out of college. maybe you have 1 or 2 internships under your belt, and this is your first job, your first full-time job as a college new grad, and the compensation packages only get higher from there as you move up to an L5, L6, L7 PM. So you have a much more stable and much higher compensation package. You'll have comprehensive benefits. So at these companies, you'll probably have, 401k matching, HSA, health insurance paid by the company. And you'll probably have lucrative stock options and RSUs. And these companies, they often give you RSUs over 3 or 4 years. And as you get near the end of your vesting schedule, the companies will give you more RSUs, more stock options. And with these companies, some companies like Amazon and Google and Microsoft, their RSUs are basically as good as cash. So, your compensation package is liquid anytime you want. You can cash them out. And it's typically something that is, makes people want to get into big tech. I'll also say that some of these companies, they also have pretty extensive benefits like free food. I think Facebook's known for even like free laundry and things like that on sites. So definitely lots of benefits that you typically wouldn't see in other industries. Now, Mark, do you want to talk about compensation and benefits at startups?
Yes. So I totally agree with Kevin. The compensation and benefit packages at large companies are going to be probably 30 to 50% higher than what you see at a startup, meaning that the salary is higher, RSUs are higher, all the perks are much better. The things like health insurance, medical insurance, all those types of things are just better. And they're better by a lot, actually. And like I said, they're better by 30 to 50%. So then you're going to ask, well, why do people join startups? And the reason is you've got the equity component. And when you join a startup, you're going to be given a much larger percentage of equity. Now, granted, the probability of that coming through is lower, but the eventual payoff if the startup does well is actually much higher. So it has much greater optionality. So what I'll say is that a large company will give you a great lifestyle. But if you join the right startup, you can have what I call a changing lifestyle. And it can be quite different. So usually, and I always tell people to join startups when they're young. Actually, I'm still joining startups when I'm not so young. But it has the opportunity for tremendous financial upside for really life-changing things. And you have life-changing things, and then all of a sudden, then some things don't seem as important anymore. And that's pretty, that can be pretty impactful over the long run. But I've also had my share of startups that have just been goose eggs.
Let's talk about key area number 5, decision-making processes. So as a PM in big tech, the decision-making processes are typically pretty structured. There's typically, as a PM, the team will probably still look to you to create some structure. But there's going to be other teams that you can probably look to see how they're doing things, how they're making decisions, how are they getting certain things out the door, and you can probably follow their guidelines. Also, if you're lucky, your team probably already has a structure. If you're working on an established product that's found product market fit, it's been in the market for some time, and the team has done all the things like releasing features and dealing with customers. And there's probably a lot of history you can look at, a lot of context you can look at to see how you would go about making decisions and going through certain processes. Like, what if someone has a disagreement? What do we do? Well, there's probably a process for that. I'd say the downside here is that in big tech, even though there are these structures and processes, decision making is a little bit slower. It's more bureaucratic. You're going to need to get more approvals from more teams and more stakeholders. And because of that, the whole process just becomes slower. And I've heard stories where at YouTube, just to move a little button, change anything front end, just because it's going to impact billions of people who are visiting the site, there's just so much process and so many approvals that you would need to go through just to move like a button maybe over by 1 pixel. So that's the decision-making process at big tech. It's probably slower than in startups. Mark, you want to talk about the decision-making process in startups?
Yeah, so the decision, as you'd not be surprised at this point, decision-making in startups is much, much faster. And it's much more dynamic, and it's much more volatile too. So what I mean by that is, as a product manager, you are empowered at a startup to make decisions and go with it. If someone contradicts you, you can go to the CEO and have a discussion with him and just run with it. So you can have very, very fast decision making. I'm kind of reminded of Mark Zuckerberg's business card when he was a small startup, and it said, "I'm the CEO, bitch." His business card actually said that. But anyways, the downside of that, however, is you've got a lot of volatility. One day your CEO and executive team says, let's do X, and next week they're going to say, let's do Y. So you've got very fast decision-making abilities, but it's also going to be very volatile as well. But it's a plus. It's a very exciting place to be.
Yep. All right. Key area 6, impact and influence. So as a PM in big tech, I think your individual impact might be a little bit less noticeable, especially if you're working on a more established product, a legacy product, something that's been in the market for a while. And here you might feel a little bit more like you're a cog in the wheel. But I think your influence will grow with seniority, right? So as you grow higher, you become an L5, L6, L7 PM. You'll definitely have more say in the direction of the product, but you might have to wait and, fulfill those shoes, and you'll have to wait until you get that seniority in order to have the kind of influence you might desire. They're just used by so many people. It could be in the scale of hundreds of thousands all the way to billions of people per day, that any sort of change will have great impact. So there's always one PM that might be needed to work on maybe just a very small feature, whereas maybe in startups, your impact might be larger. You might have more scope and you might have more influence. So with that, Mark, why don't you talk a little bit more about the impact and influence for PMs and startups?
Yeah, that's exactly the right trade-off. So at a small startup, you're going to have scope and impact over broad swaths of functionality, right? You're not going to own a little tiny box. You're going to own the entire box, right? So you're going to have lots and lots and lots of scope and impact. And what that means is when you take that to another role, you can say, oh, I built the entire authentication system. Oh, I built the entire infrastructure. Oh, I built the entire external API. Oh, I built the whatever the box is. You built the entire thing, every single part of it. And you can make some really powerful claims there. The other claim you can make is, I doubled the customer size. I doubled revenue. I doubled profit margins, things like that, right? But the number you're starting with is much, much smaller, right? You're not going to go from $1 billion to $2 billion, right? You're going to go from 100,000 to 200,000. So the scale is much smaller. So it's really a trade-off. Large company, you've got tremendous amounts of distribution, very small units of functionality. At a startup, you've got tremendous functionality set, but tiny, tiny, tiny distribution.
Key area 7, work environment and culture. In big tech, the work environment is established. Depending on where you are, it could be more corporate. But at the same time, there's a lot of resources for you as a employee in a big tech company. Employee resource groups. In big tech, it could be more formal. You might have cubicles. Some companies have open office spaces. But overall, very structured meetings, more corporate. Yeah. Mark, how about startups?
Yeah, startups, small tech, very casual, very fun, very local, very community-based. It's more kind of like find my people kind of a type of thing. So much, much less structure, much, much less formality. There is a dark side to this, however. And the dark side of this is what I call chemistry. So when you're working at an organization that has 10,000 people, there's lots of people to get along with, right? When you're working at a company of 25 people or 10 people or 50 people, right? You have to get along with these people, right? Or not, right? And if not, that means that you're probably not going to work well there. So chemistry plays a big, big role. And so you really want to check small companies before you join them to make sure that you're joining a culture which you can appreciate and which you think you'll thrive in, because that's the culture that exists and that's the culture that's going to be, and you better hope that you like it.
Yeah. I mean, in big tech, culture still probably varies team to team, but overall, if you're joining Amazon, you know that Amazon has a writing culture, and no matter what team you're on, you're going to be writing a lot. Versus at Google, you might have a different kind of culture. Let's go to key area number 8, risk and reward balance. So I think in big tech, you can definitely say that the risk and reward balance, you have much lower risk. and also potentially lower reward as well in terms of equity growth, right? So if you're joining a company like Google, Microsoft, Apple, these are already very large companies, potentially trillion-dollar companies. The possibility of them growing from 1 trillion to 2 trillion is probably less likely than a company going from thousands to being worth billions. So that's something you want to consider, but also lower risk, right? Like I mentioned earlier, Microsoft, Google, Apple, these stocks, these RSUs, they're basically cash. So lower risk here. Mark, how about startups?
Exactly the opposite. Startups have high risk, high reward. And remember, most startups, despite what their CEO says, most startups have not achieved product market fit, right? Finding product market fit is really, really hard, right? That is a high risk, high reward problem. If you can figure that out, you're going to get lots of rewards. If you're not going to figure that out, well, you're not going to get those rewards. And that's where the risk is. So it's really as simple as that equation. And there it is.
Cool. Let's do key area number 9, learning and development. So I think the opportunities that you have to learn and develop in big tech definitely is there, right? If you're going to be around people who've probably worked in the industry for 10, 15, maybe 20 or more years, a lot to learn from them, really a lot of exposure to best practices and large scale operations. When I'm working at Amazon, I'm working along people who've worked in the ad space for many, many years, and I get to learn from them and be a fly on the wall, and also have access to a lot of extensive training and programs and resources there. At Amazon, we have an internal search where you can go ahead and you can search any kind of topic you want, anything you want to learn, it's there. Now in startups, Mark, how's the learning and development?
Oh, I miss a lot of those. I miss a lot of those resources that are available in big companies that you don't get at startups. So at startups, you just don't get those things. You have to teach yourself. There is a positive side, however, to this, which is at a startup, you're going to be closely involved with every functional part of the organization. You're going to be closely involved in finance. You're going to be closely involved in sales. You're going to be closely involved in marketing. You're going to be closely involved in customer support and operations. You're going to see how the sausage is made at every single level. I don't think there's actually, if your eventual goal is to maybe be a CEO, which I'm hoping it is, there's not a better training ground for CEOs than being a product manager at a startup, because you're going to see how it's made, and that's going to prepare you to be a CEO of your own company one day. So the learning and developing opportunity is your own to grab, but you've got to go grab it because it's not going to be served to you on a silver platter.
Absolutely. Now let's get into our final area, work-life balance. This is something that a lot of people care about when they're trying to think about, which company should I go to? In big tech, this definitely varies by company and team. Some big tech companies are known to be very demanding, but some others are known to be a little bit more chill. And the term for that typically is rest and vest, where you just go there, you do your work 9 to 5, you clock out. Maybe you're even working like 35 hours a week. You clock out, and that's it, right? So, big tech definitely varies, but I think it's definitely more chill than startups. Mark, how about startups? How's the work-life balance there?
So startups are work-life balance. Yeah, I would say that there's a lot more work than there is life balance. At a startup, you're really going to have to put in the hours, and you're going to get a lot from that, obviously. But make no mistake, it's not a 9 to 5 job. You're going to have to put in lots of extra hours, lots of extra time, especially if you're a founder or co-founder in like really early stage, right? There's no such thing as like a weekends or off hours. You're just on all the time, and it can be incredibly taxing. So this is something that you're going to want to choose, right? And you want to choose to do it or choose not to do it. But I wouldn't go into a startup saying, I really want to have good work-life balance, because that might not be the most awesome expectation, but you're going to work hard. And again, those dividends are going to pay off if the company does well.
Makes sense. So those were 10 areas, 10 categories that we wanted to explore between working as a product manager in big tech at a FAANG company versus an early stage startup. I think I just want to close this out by saying that we're not pushing you towards one route or the other. There's definitely pros and cons, as you can hear from myself and Mark. There's trade-offs in terms of stability, growth, compensation, and work culture. Also, I think it really depends on your individual career objectives and what your preferences are regarding these aspects, right? If you're someone who's been struggling to pivot into product management, maybe you found it hard to get into a Google or FAANG PM job, but a startup is willing to take the bet on you, maybe because you have some prior vertical experience and they want you to be their PM. This could be good for you also in your career. With that said, before we close out the video, Mark, do you want to give the audience some way to find you if they want to have some PM, one-on-one PM interview coaching?
Sure, you bet. So if you'd love to have some PM coaching, you can reach me at productbymark.com. Happy to help you out. Love coaching people, whether you're at big companies or small companies. And like Kevin mentioned, there's no right answer which is better, big companies or small companies. I actually think over a long product career, which I'm hoping you will all have, you'll actually have a good collection of small companies and large companies from which you can draw your experience and life experience from, because they both offer very different things and they both have their places.
Absolutely. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave a laptop emoji with your comment below. We'll reply to all your comments. Like, subscribe. We'll be making more of these PM interview prep and PM career videos. Just let us know what kind of content you think will be helpful for you in your product management journey. And that's it for today. Good luck with your upcoming interviews.